Okay, here's a question. And here's a question. And has because to be fair, to be honest, I think like where I am currently in my life is that like I've said about finding this kind of like middle ground of emotions, and it's like it's a lot of things about learning how to develop on that. Obviously like the first initial stage is like cool, you learn how to figure out your emotions, but also how do you develop? How do you move on? What's the second order effect of these things? Like letting go of stuff, mastering attachment, all these things. And, for me, you were speaking about how you learn your kind of that development through gaming. For me, I learned it through like romantic comedies and like poetry and all these novels and literature, which shows you how to gain something, how to have that kind of connection with people, but not really the other side of it. And so like it is a very new thing for me to have to learn traits and personality traits where it's like actually there is a boundaries and like having all these things and recognizing that within yourself, and like when you come against struggle, how do you face that? Because for me, similar to what you're saying, it's always like head on like what is struggle, whatever, like I'll just power through, but there is certain parts of life, and that comes in maturity, understanding how to really like maneuver through that. So kind of the question I have for you, what to prioritize, exactly, yeah. So question I have for you is that what advice or what things have you learned from either anime or manga about like figuring out, even gaming, about figuring out how to maybe go the other way, maybe that is a dead end, actually, to figure out how to let go and move through that.
Like, I think I'm saying this as someone who has had, not that I'm special for this, but has had regrets, probably didn't always follow a dream, let's say, in the right way and stuff, so I'm definitely not giving this advice as someone who's necessarily succeeded at life. But I think it's always good, and this might sound a bit cliche, but it's always good to put things in a very clear perspective of what you're capable of. And that doesn't mean like how talented you are, that doesn't mean thinking like, oh, I should have done this, and I just was too lazy. No, I mean, like, what's your support system? Like, do you have family behind you? Do you have family behind you with money and you don't need to worry about them too much? Do you have aging family? Do you have siblings beneath you that you need to worry about? Can this be prioritized? If it can be prioritized, is it sustainable, And I think if you get to a point where you realize, like, man, maybe I could have persevered more, but if I want to achieve this thing and maybe it didn't work out, have perspective of perhaps why it didn't. And that doesn't mean make excuses, but I think it means make your peace with it and move on to something else, because I feel that making peace bit doesn't happen for a lot of people, myself included. And I think it can take a long time, and maybe by the time you do make peace, it could be too late and you don't go on to that next thing, which maybe is even more beneficial to you and something that you even prefer more, but you don't see that in the moment because you're just thinking, this happened and I couldn't achieve it, I suck, I'm shit, and you sink into that hole. Maybe not as direct as that, but
I know
in
exactly
a sense.
what you mean. I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
So definitely, like, just put things in a realistic perspective, and I think talk to yourself how you would speak to someone else. Like, I told you about a bad situation earlier, and it was like I could have been super hard on myself and tell myself I'm this, I'm that, I'm this, I'm that. But you say to me kindly, like, oh, don't worry, next time it'll be different. This is fine, whatever. But when we talk to ourselves,
so different, right?
So different, man, so different. And I'm trying to learn that, and I think that's my advice. It's like put things in a fair perspective and give yourself graces that you would afford to others that you just don't to yourself for some reason.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think like especially for someone like me, and I think I'm a recovering people pleaser, because I've just always learned to like engage with people and everything's fine and everything's great, but there's with that, right, is that conversation you have with yourself about when things don't go as you expect, because you always have that kind of level of scrutiny for yourself. I think that's kind of like, it's fascinating you think about these traits, right? Because on one hand, that is a positive trait, to always be sometimes always hard on yourself, or even sometimes always open to people, right? But to what extreme, and to what extent do you do that, and in what in situation and in what environment? Because you feel like if that's in every environment and everything, then that's obviously something that can be taken to, it becomes a vice instead of a virtue, and like figuring those two out, and I think that these are funny things, because I always thought, you know, I always thought once I got to a certain age and I figured out these emotions, because I did that, went through the struggle, figuring out these, like, actually, like, placing it, setting boundaries for myself, you know, thinking about the people around me, bringing new people around me, having that kind of openness to actually have that relationship with them, you know, you feel like you've learned the skill, you've learned the trait. But life is, you know, life is a flat circle. We always come back to that same things again. We just test us all the time about how much we've actually grown, how much we've actually learned, you know. And I think that for someone like me, like I've kind of been saying, you know, that people pleaser element is like figuring out as I get older what that means for each iteration of me. You know, me at 25 years old is very different to me at 21 years old. Me at 21 years old, people pleasing was very different to me at 25. You know, it's like, what have I learned in those 4 years, and how can I apply that to now? Do you kind of relate to that? Or
I do relate to it, and I think as someone who is also a perpetual people pleaser, I've definitely put myself in, let's say, unfavorable positions.
for others,
And I don't even think there's anything necessarily too wrong with that at times. Like, I think there is a balance for sure. And I think for me, what I've kind of tried to focus on is that I can be a people pleaser, but I can also be like, no. I was going to say I could also please myself. That's not what I mean, but I guess that as well, maybe. But jokes aside, like, you can be a people pleaser, but you can also ensure that you have your own best interests at heart, for real. And you know what, ultimately, at the end of the day, if you do just like being a people pleaser, I don't think there's anything wrong with it, obviously, if it's done in a healthy way. But if you do like to be a people pleaser, you can't effectively please people if you're not okay, you know. And so I think it's always got to be this cost like benefit analysis you need to do, where it's like, look, I'm not okay right now, I'm putting up a barrier, and the barrier isn't to keep you out. Well, I guess it is a little bit.
Keep me in.
Well, it's you know, it's not like it shouldn't be focused on them. It's focused on just yourself, and like, I just need space for a minute to recalibrate.
It's king putting up the walls because they've been attacked by all these 4 nations. That is a kingdom joke you will not get unless you read the manga, so go read the manga. But okay, cool. One of the things I wanted to talk about too, jumping ahead a little bit then, was to have a little bit of a shift, but also I wanted to talk about comedy and like just different aspects of the things that we also share, we also like. I think that an aspect of what our relationship that I really appreciate is that we kind of have the same kind of humor, and even though we don't have the exact same kind of humor, it's very much a lot of crossover, which I really appreciate. But one of the things is that I wanted to ask you is that, what form of comedy do you enjoy the most? You know, there's different forms. There's memes, there's stand-up, there's just different, you know. But as you know, as you get older and as you kind of your taste kind of change, what are you drawn to still?
So